Hello, welcome to episode 9 of How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams. Today's episode is based on chapter 5 of the book, and it's called Music Publishing Isn't Scary or Confusing. The full chapter title in the book is Plus How to Land a Sync Placement, but that's going to be next week's episode, the sync placement stuff with Lauren Ross. But today I'm going to interview Songtrust President Molly Neuman. Before I do, I just want to define music publishing and educate you on how to collect on it, which we cover for the most part in Molly's interview, but I just want to give like an educational piece so you have all of that information before you listen to that interview. So first, what is music publishing? Music publishing has definitely freaked out songwriters / artists for a long time, and I understand why. In the 1950s, 60s, 70s, there are countless horror stories of songwriters signing their music publishing rights away for what feels like a lot of money. I'm just making this up, but like $25,000 in 1970, and then the catalog goes on to make millions. I always use this example. I was on a panel once years ago with the Village People's current manager, and I think the panel must have been on music publishing or it came up, and I said, well, I'm going to guess that if any of the Village People guys wrote YMCA and those famous songs, that they don't own the rights to the publishing. And the manager said yes, said that was correct. So back in the day, you had to sign your publishing rights away to collect on your publishing. But again, let me define it. I probably should have done that first. So as we've talked about, there are two rights in music. There's the master recording side, and then there's the songwriting side. So music publishing, so let me back up. I swear it's easy, I promise. Everyone knows what a record company is supposed to do in theory. I assume everyone does. I feel like I could stop someone on the street and they would, for the most part, understand what a record company does. So a record company's job is to promote and legally exploit, as in collect as much money as possible for the master recording. That's their job. Collect as much money as possible on the recording and promote it so it gets as much money as possible. All music publishing is the exact same thing for your songwriting. So there's no reason to run to the hills in terror, being completely overwhelmed and intimidated by music publishing. And I think that happens for two reasons. One, there are a variety of revenue streams that make up music publishing, but I just want to teach you what it is and how you collect on it. If you want to go read a book about music publishing and learn about, I should define a mechanical royalty, but learn about all of the sub revenue streams that make up music publishing, feel free to do that. Keep that book on the shelf. But I, like the vast majority of songwriters / artists that I meet, don't know, and industry people. There are tons of industry people. I'm jumping around, but I remember being in a meeting with someone who was 20 years older than me and had been working in the industry his entire adult life, who said, I never understood all that music publishing stuff. And that just super confused me, because it's like, if you're going to enter a field, in this case, the music industry, don't you want to know everything about it? But like I said, so there's all these sub revenue streams. I don't think you need to know that. You need to know what music publishing is, which is what I just defined, and how to collect on it, which I'll talk about next. So again, and then the collecting on it, that's also the scary part from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, because to collect on it, you had to sign your music publishing rights away to collect on it. So there's a lot of horror stories, but it's not like that anymore. I mean, you can still do those deals, which I'll talk about, but you can own your rights and collect on your music publishing, which is very exciting. So I write a song, or you write a song, or an album, or an EP, or an opera, or whatever. And the first thing you want to do, which is what we covered in the previous episode, is you want to make sure that you are signed up for a performing rights organization. In the US, that's primarily ASCAP and BMI. So pick one, register yourself, sign up only once, but every time you write a song and you agree to the songwriting splits and you put it in writing and you sign it or you email it to each other, as we've talked about, then you log in to your PRO, so ASCAP or BMI in the US, and you register the songs. So that's the first thing you do. And I don't know if we covered that part clearly enough in the previous episode. Every time you write a song, if you're a solo songwriter, just register it with your PRO. If it's a co-write, obviously agree to the splits, and then you both need to register it. So that's the first step. And like I said in the previous episode and said throughout the podcast, I totally understand, when you sign up for a PRO, you are not collecting on your publishing in full. And that is understandably totally confusing because when you sign up for a PRO, that is also split into two sides, the writer's share and the quote publisher's share. And so when ASCAP, for example, prompts me to create what's called a publishing designee, they're like, oh, you're Emily White, the songwriter. Great. So that's your writer's share. Do you want to be Emily White Music for your publisher's share? Of course, that's totally confusing. It's like, oh, that's my publisher's share. So my publishing is all set. So ASCAP and BMI and performing rights organizations are not music publishers. They just collect performing rights royalties. So if your music is being covered, streamed, sold, all of the above, and you are just signed up for a PRO, you are missing money. And that is what this chapter and episode is about. I have worked with way too many songwriters and artists that people have heard of that have national, international careers that were not collecting on their music publishing. So if you are just signed up for your performing rights organization as a songwriter and you are not collecting on your publishing in any other way, you are most likely missing money. I only say most likely because I assume there's some activity going on with your songs, which we talked about previously. There's very much likely money sitting there. So go get it. And that's what we're going to talk about. So if you are just getting going, I am a huge advocate of Songtrust, and not because they've sponsored a previous episode or they're sponsoring a future episode and Molly's on this episode. As I mentioned, that is a very authentic partnership. What I love, so on the recorded music side, on the distribution side, most people know what TuneCore, CD Baby, DistroKid, which we're going to get into in a future episode, what they do. They distribute your music, get it on Spotify, all that good stuff. That has, goodish stuff. But again, we'll break down distribution in multiple episodes in the future. But what those services essentially did was democratize music distribution, because in the pre-digital era, you would have to sign your recording rights away to a record company if you were fortunate enough to do it, because record companies could afford recording studios, which were only 1%ers could afford back in the day, which I know seems like a different planet because it kind of was in many ways. And the record company also held the keys to distribution. So TuneCore, CD Baby, DistroKid, that is now open that up to anyone for $30, $50, whatever the latest terms are. You can distribute your music worldwide. Songtrust completely democratized music publishing, where, like I said, back in the day, you used to pretty much have to, I say pretty much because there were people that would sign up for their, try to collect all their sub-publishing revenue streams. But I am a workaholic, but that is just an absurd amount of work. So you would have to sign your rights, so especially in the pre-digital era. So you would have to sign your music publishing rights away for a company to come in and collect those royalties on your behalf. So Songtrust was the first major player in the game to completely democratize music publishing collection. So anyone can go to Songtrust and sign up. It is a $100 fee to sign up, which, I don't totally love that. So just to show you how authentic these, my partnerships are, I'm always going to be open with you all what I think. But Songtrust runs a lot of, webinars, promos. I'm sure if you just search their social media or check out some of their events, you can get a discount code for that. So after after the $100, Songtrust is going to collect 85, or sorry, Songtrust is going to collect your music publishing revenue, and you as a songwriter are going to keep 85%, and they keep 15. I believe that's off the top of my head. I don't think it's 80-20, but all of those are very akin to an administrative publishing deal, which I'm trying to say all of those percentages in terms. So I'm 99% sure it's 85%, 15, but it's around there for Songtrust. You can get out of Songtrust relatively quickly. Again, I should have looked these things up, but I know this for a fact. Songtrust does not take any rights ownership. Okay, they are there to go and administer and collect on your publishing. I hope that's clear. Now, there are other companies that do that, and I'm going to highlight two in particular that are really similar, and Molly and I talk about this. So when you do distribute through TuneCore or TuneCore or CD Baby, and I assume DistroKid, but we're going to dig into DistroKid in a future episode. There's like a box, there's a prompt that comes up when you're distributing your music, and I'm completely paraphrasing, but it's like, do you want to collect more money? And basically you can opt in through those distributors. They're called aggregators in the quote music industry, but they are technically distributors. There's a box where it basically asks, can we administer your publishing on these songs, on this album? But it's phrased as like, want to make more money? And it's like, who wouldn't click yes? So again, I have worked with artists where I've said, have you ever checked that box? Have you ever checked that box? And they're like, no. And then I go out and do a publishing deal for them. And it turns out the answer is yes. And we have to untangle the catalog. And it can literally take years to get everything flowing in the right place. So as appealing as that box is, I encourage you not to check those boxes, even though I know for the people that know, and Molly and I talk about this, Songtrust and CD Baby are owned by the same company. So Songtrust is CD Baby's publishing administrator. But my point is, if you distribute through CD Baby once, but then maybe you do DistroKid next time, or maybe you sign with a label or whatever, then your publishing is suddenly all over the place. And what I love about Songtrust is your music publishing is housed in one place. So I swear I was a Songtrust fangirl before they started sponsoring episodes. But, I'm sure we'll talk about this in the future if we talk about branding and stuff. But, those partnerships work when they're authentic, and that one is. But I would be remiss to not talk about traditional music publishing deals for those of you that are interested in that or have that or whatever. So there are two main kinds of music publishing deals in the modern era. There's an admin or administrative deal, and that's where, very similar to the Songtrust terms, you own the rights to your music publishing. This split definitely is negotiable. If you can get 85% in your favor, 15% to the publishing administrator, great. Sometimes it's 80-20. I wouldn't go as low as 75-25 without some sort of advance, even if it's like $500 or $1,000 or just some sort of gesture. That's where that can be negotiable, right? So maybe you don't want or need an advance. And say they're offering you 75-25 and $1,000 advance. You could say, you know what? I want to waive the $1,000 and I'd rather do 80-20 because that's a better split. There's no right or wrong. The more success you have, the larger you grow your catalog, the more activity there is on your catalog on the songwriting side. That's where you can creep those numbers up. I mean, I'm making this, maybe I'm making this up, maybe I'm not, but like Max Martin and those pop songwriters that wrote like Britney Spears' big hits, and I'm sure many more. I think I heard they have like a 1% admin deal, right? So they keep 99% of their song, their music publishing royalties, and the administrator gets 1%, and the administrator is psyched to get 1% because that's a lot of money. So the big difference between Songtrust and an administrative deal, even though they're really, really similar, like I said, as far as like the term, well, I'll talk about the terms in a second. As far as the percentages go, Songtrust does not do sync pitching. So if you're signed up for Songtrust, don't worry. We cover how to land a sync placement next week. But yeah, just know that. And then with an administrative publishing deal, they should be pitching you to sync. So that is also part of that. Now, there's also co-publishing agreements, and that's where a publisher is going to take a percentage of your copyright. Sometimes it's for like 20, 25 years. Sometimes it's in perpetuity, aka forever. Only do this if you are receiving a significant advance. And I mean, once in a while, really once in a blue moon, thankfully, but once in a while, I still hear of, music publishing companies trying to become an artist's music publisher, a co-publisher, taking a percentage of copyright and not offering an advance. Now, believe it or not, I'm not against co-publishing deals because I've had artists get, advances that are large enough where they can buy a home, or maybe large enough, not that large, but large enough where it can fund promotion, it can fund a tour in early days. So I've done that with artists before. I did that with a young band where they owned their master recording, but we did a lucrative publishing deal for them. And then that helped to basically fund kind of setting up their own label. So once you understand these fundamentals, and I'm talking about all of it, like the master recording side, we talked about getting creative with different points if you don't necessarily have cash. Same here. You can get creative with, your different rights. I feel like if you fundamentally understand the bigger picture. So like I said, I've given up publishing rights always with the artist's permission, obviously, either if that's a situation I walked into and they were always getting, big advances for co-publishing deals and giving up that portion of copyright every time they release an album. Or like I said, I've worked with new artists that are into it who wanted to retain their master recording rights, but were open to a co-publishing deal on the songwriting or music publishing side, to the extent that a friend reached out to me once and he'd been offered a publishing deal and wanted me to take a look at it. He's not old, but it wasn't his first rodeo by any means. He was probably in his 30s. And it was a $2,000 advance for a co-publishing deal. And I knew this person wasn't super broke and didn't necessarily need the $2,000. This was before the pandemic. And I said to him, I'm like, if you need $2,000, go work at Starbucks or something, because they are going to take a portion of your copyright for the next 20 years. So I did the math for him, whatever 2,000 is divided by 20. I was like, that's how much you're getting per year to give up a portion of your copyright for this $2,000 advance. And he did the thing that artists always do. And I told him that. He's like, well, I'm scared. I'm scared to say anything. And I said to him, go back to them and ask if they only do co-publishing deals or if they are open to an admin deal. And there's nothing wrong with asking that. It's a very informed question. I don't remember the answer, to be honest. Long story short, he was able to get the advance up to $7,500 once he really understood, the difference between an admin deal and a co-pub deal. I still think that's too low. I would have liked to see 10 or 15 grand for him, but it was his choice. He felt good about the $7,500, and that's obviously a lot more than $2,000. So I hope that gives you a fundamental understanding of what music publishing is, how to collect on it. And I don't really have anything else to say about that, because that's all I want you to understand. Like I said, we don't need to get overwhelmed about every little royalty rate and, every nuance of modern copyright. You can, especially if you want to become an activist in that space, amazing. But I fundamentally want you to know what music publishing is and how you collect on it. And finally, if you are in some sort of publishing deal, we've talked a lot about how to, work with industry people, work with different partners to maximize benefits for you. And, I talk in the book, congratulations, you have a publishing deal. Now it's time to get to work, which might feel weird because you've probably had meetings, maybe even, depending on pandemic times or not, like a dinner or whatever, where all these people are excited about you and your songwriting. And they are. They wouldn't work with you if that wasn't the case. However, we want you to be a priority, even if you're one of the greatest songwriters in history, which I don't mean sarcastically at all. and, put yourself in the publisher's shoes. We want to make their job as seamless as possible. And they are literally more often than not working with thousands of songs, thousands of copyrights. So even if you're Paul McCartney, we want you and your songs to stand out. So in my experience, the best way to do that is just to keep your publisher informed on the latest and greatest, which I think we've talked about before. We're definitely going to talk about throughout the podcast as far as working with industry partners. So, you don't want to email them every day, on weekends, on holidays, because the goal is for your email to get read. I would say once a month, if there is news, a really short and focused and to the point email. It can be bullet pointed of, here's my latest and greatest. I have these shows coming up. I have these webcasts coming up. If you or anyone on your team or music supervisors would like guest lists or guest list codes for the webcasts, let me know. I mean, so many artists and their teams and songwriters and their teams don't do that, or just kind of take that for granted, just offering guest lists and stuff like that. Here are some press hits I've gotten. Here's just whatever your latest and greatest news is. And that's going to help you, help for you to stay in the forefront of your music publisher and sync pitching team's minds. And it's also going to give them tools to be able to share those links and share those tour dates with music supervisors and work your catalog as hard as possible. And if you can't, and also like I said, don't send on like weekends and holidays and stuff. I would say send these emails I'd say your best time is like late morning on a Tuesday. Monday midday is good. Wednesday is okay. I'm sure I overthink this stuff, but I'm also sure that I don't. As it gets into Thursday and Friday, people are dragging, especially as shows are returning and stuff, like they can be fried by the end of the week. So again, the whole point is for your email to get read, for it to be as effective as possible. If you can't send the email at that time, there's plenty of free programs like Boomerang for Gmail, where you can schedule your emails to send at a more optimal time. So that's my overview of music publishing. I hope it's helpful. I hope you understand what it is now, how to collect on it. And now I'm going to dig in even more by interviewing Songtrust President Molly Neuman. So thanks so much. And we'll catch you next week on episode 9, which is the second half of the chapter 5 title, How to Land a Sync Placement. But in the meantime, we'll continue on with Molly, and music publishing isn't scary or confusing. Hope you enjoy, and talk to you soon. Hello, my name is Emily White, and welcome to How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams. And today we're going to dig in on Chapter 5, Music Publishing Isn't Scary or Confusing, plus how to land a sync placement. I'm so thrilled to welcome my guest, Songtrust President Molly Neuman. Welcome, Molly.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me.
It is so my pleasure. So let's start at the beginning. You honestly have one of the coolest and most interesting careers I've ever seen. So, well, first, you're a musician. Do you still play music?
I don't have the opportunity right now, especially in December of 2020, but and because of my calendar and my family and all of the sort of things that life has been generous enough to give me. But I do still consider myself a drummer. I just am not playing very much.
Yeah. If you don't mind if I ask a personal question, how old are your kids, and do they play music at all?
I only have one daughter. She'll be 7 soon.
Nice.
She doesn't play yet, but she has a keyboard and she has a couple of the sort of early kid guitars. She's taken music classes and she seems musical, but we're doing our best not to shove her in any one direction just yet.
Of course. I just think it would be so cool to have a parent or a mom that's a drummer, because that's like the first thing that kids do,
Yeah. It's interesting. We're going to be, I'll be talking to her class in January around, sort of, they're doing a segment about imagination. And so they asked if any parents had careers that were connected to creativity. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about that, even though I'm currently working in what's arguably the least actually creative part of our industry, but I think is, the most compelling and truthfully energizing if we can help be part of an improved um, ecosystem around how to manage these, complicated sets of rights. Then, it's all math. And even though I've never considered myself, I'm one of those people that was sort of profiled as like, oh, not particularly good at math, but drums and music are all about numbers and repetition and intersection of patterns, and as is music publishing.
I love it. And I actually think music publishing is very creative. And we'll get into that.
Okay.
But take us to the beginning. When did you first start playing music? You obviously just have a phenomenal career as a musician and have done so much. So start there in the early days for us, if you don't mind.
No, I when I was in college, I brought a guitar. I think I used my summer job money between high school and college to buy an acoustic guitar and took it to college. I think that was a very sort of like connecting image that I could, like, you bring a guitar, an acoustic, you play in your dorm room. 10,000 Maniacs was like probably one of my favorite bands. And so, acoustic rock was something that, I could sort of it'd be inspired by. And I ended up taking guitar classes at school as sort of a way to just like, when you want to learn something, you take a class in addition to the other subjects that I was studying. And my next door neighbor in the dorms was from a town called Olympia, Washington, which has I'm from Washington, D.C., and we met at the University of Oregon. And she just shared some of the music that was from her town, which was really accessible. And you might say amateurish, but, I say accessible, that, it was just something that anybody could do, super melodic, super catchy and memorable. And we started making songs together before we were actually a band that, played, and we were learning at the same time. By my second year of school, I had traded my acoustic guitar in for probably a 65 Music Master. It's a Fender. It's a 3 1/4 size Fender guitar that looks like a small Mustang, basically, with one pickup. And it was really cool. I still have it. And it was something that, I was like, okay, so we're sort of pivoting from acoustic to punk. And we started our band, and it was just the two of us at first. And she was a singer and lyricist, and I was the sort of like instrumentalist. So I wrote, I did the guitar parts, and then there were some songs where I just played drums. And when we recorded, I did both. And then we added a guitar player after that. So that was like an evolution of, sort of like layers of instrumentation on top of what we were doing. And so that band became Bratmobile. We, were students and doing most of our work while we were studying and while we were in school, but like touring in the summer and in spring breaks and stuff like that. And a little bit bi-coastal because Aaron was based in DC. Allison and I were in the West Coast for school, but my family is in DC. So we were kind of like, just took everything that we could, cheap plane tickets, which was like well before the time of, ubiquitous JetBlue, cheap flights and things like that. And, that was like the opportunity. We were also talking about feminism and issues of like opportunity for girls and women, particularly. And so that was a bit of the sort of community that we were connecting with at the same time.
So how did you make the transition into, running and owning labels and becoming a manager? I mean, that is fairly different than being an artist.
Yeah. So we, after I graduated college, I ended up moving to the Bay Area and sort of was part of the East Bay punk rock scene. And Lookout Records was the label of record there, in a fashion similar to Discord in DC, really documenting mostly the local bands and the sort of local community. And I had an opportunity to work for Lookout right when Green Day was becoming sort of one of the biggest bands in the world. when their first album came out on Warner. And ironically, like I remember you mentioned before we started talking to Don Passman, and I remember before they did their deal with Warner, Trey, the drummer, and I like chatting at a show, and he was talking about their all the options that they had, and he's like, "Yep, our lawyer Don Passman, he wrote the book." And he was talking about, Don Passman's book as like sort of the quintessential guide, which it still is for many of us, and it's sort of funny, like circle of history. But when they became huge, the label had been super small and managed on sort of like a very, very like, punk and, duct taped sort of way of putting things together. And so I came in to put a little bit of infrastructure around it, do some, support for the other bands that basically weren't Green Day. And Green Day was no longer an active label band on the roster, but the catalog was. And that was in the, 94. So it was a really, kind of crazy time in music. The Offspring was becoming huge. Rancid became huge shortly thereafter, who were also from the East Bay. And punk was, like becoming mainstream in lots of ways. Independent artists were being signed by majors, some to, some success and some to, controversial results, still to this day. And, so that was sort of like the ecosystem that we were operating in. And, just growing up, like learning new things, taking on, developing relationships with some of the bands that we signed, like the Donnas, resulted in me becoming their manager with a partner who had been their business manager also. And so, that just sort of opened up new areas to explore that I was interested in. I've always been pretty curious, and learning by doing seemed to be a pretty consistent way of approaching, and having access to, even when the Donnas signed to a major, learning about how they did things and, taking advantage of that network, I felt was valuable to the other part of my work at Lookout still with our other bands. And so, that's been kind of the recipe through my career is like, oh, there's something interesting to do. I'd like to learn about it. I would say that, perhaps at this later phase of my career, I'm able to luckily, mostly focus on one job, which is also a very big job. Now that I'm at Songtrust, there's a lot of, of work to do. And we have a large team that, we're very committed to, as well as our clients. So being able to sort of like thread all of those things together, but the early commitment to independence and do it yourself, ethics, combined with the way that our industry has transformed through, streaming and, digital sales and, all and a global network that's accessible to independent, songwriters and musicians now is, just a completely different world. And so, I also try to remain thoughtful about the fact that, we don't know what's next, so you kind of always have to stay on your toes.
Definitely. And I'm sure that curiosity is what interested you in kind of entering the tech space a little bit more. So how did moving on to EMusic come about?
Well, I had been, our label was a client of The Orchard, which was a sister company of EMusic's, and we had been having, conversations about, just the general business of that relationship. And I got a call at one point when I was doing mostly management at that point. So it was about 2006. And I had been consulting a little bit for The Orchard on some of their sort of international label and, sort of new labels that they wanted to bring in. And they said, we have this new role at EMusic around, label relations. We're sort of changing leadership and management of it. And, would you be interested? And so I hadn't really considered a full-time job at a different company until then, but it did seem like a good fit. It was a great opportunity. And I'm glad that I took that. So it, sort of pivoted into the space. It was the company at that point was focused 100% on independent repertoire. So that was a very nice fit. And I think, my background gave it a little bit of a different sort of understanding around, some of the issues that were important to independent companies. I was also at that point, on the board of HYM, which, had just been started then. And so, it was like a really nice opportunity for me to grow in, and there was international expansion happening, so I was able to take advantage of that and learn new parts of the business, and also learn more about like different kinds of licensing and deal management and things like that, which were have been relevant in my career.
Okay, that's amazing. And then you moved on to become the head of music for Kickstarter, which I feel like when you were there, if it's okay to say, that's when it was really in its heyday.
Well, yeah, I'm very proud of that time working at Kickstarter. I was, asked to join them by my former EMusic colleagues, Yancey Strickler, who was the co-founder and CEO at the time, and Kendall Ratley, and now Kendall Shore, sorry. And, we had, always kept in touch and always maintained good relationships. And I was very proud of what they were doing. And they had not yet had the chance to put someone in to help support the music category that had come from the industry. So the woman who had been sort of the primary sort of person on the music category, Haley, was, she had done a great job, and she worked on incredible campaigns, as you know, Amanda Palmer specifically from the Amanda side, and then became part of the Kickstarter team. Mm-hmm. And so, it was a strong foundation. The campaigns that had run prior to me joining were De La Soul and other like really significant campaigns, which were, transformational for many of the creators. And, my mandate was to obviously grow the category. We want to, make it more healthy and grow the success of the projects and, how much people are raising. But I think I was also trying to propose a narrative that I think is still relevant in our industry around, especially early stage musicians and bands and other creators, using their community, even if it's small, to sort of like make their case. And that the campaign element of Kickstarter, like having to sort of have a moment to announce it and share it and grow it and, hopefully have it be successful. And the sort of the math and the work that you have to do in preparation and while it's live, those are actually like super important skills to have as a songwriter, as a artist, and in terms of being able to share your story and your message, and so I was sort of trying to propose collaborative scenarios with labels to say, wouldn't it be a great thing to sort of have some kind of mutually supportive scheme where if the artist had a successful campaign, you might automatically match it. And that could be sort of an established program that would help the artist become stronger and help the label and make a more sound investment. And it sort of like equalizes a little bit the relationship between the two, and God forbid the artists have more leverage in their negotiations. I always was inspired by obviously De La Soul was an incredibly huge artist when they had been on Tommy Boy and Warner and all of those things, but when they did their Kickstarter campaign, they had such success and were able to use that lack of advance need to have a really good back end deal on the distribution. And like, isn't that really what we're going for? Like, they own their intellectual property. The partner that they're working with knows that there's an audience that's ready to go to support the work. And I think that there was there was specifics to iron out around making sure that everyone's contribution is remunerated properly. But it can be done in a way that is like really much more fair and responsible. And, if an artist perhaps isn't as successful as they expected, that's also important information. Like, what do you learn? In my career, I've had some low points too, and they inform me almost every day on what I don't want to do again, right? So if you think about it, and just from that logical sort of point of view, an unsuccessful effort can be almost more valuable than raising the 5,000 to record your EP or whatever it is.
Incredible. So that is like, and it's such a great point you make about, Kickstarter and, just about like paying for the master and then the audience. I love all that. Cause I was initially going to say like Kickstarter to me is it's fan facing and now you're the president of Songtrust, and that almost has nothing to do with fans, but well,
it's interesting, but because Songtrust, works, I think what is probably not the most obvious connection point, but I think is something that has connected me, is we are offering access to a part of the industry that has been historically very inaccessible, right? Like it's just like global publishing administration and collections from, and direct collections from societies through our direct affiliation network and the digital licensing schemes that we participate in are not something that like the independent songwriter or even the independent publisher has had a very sort of easy way to tap into. Historically, sub-publishing networks for small publishing companies or even medium-sized publishing companies are a pretty traditional scheme, and that those can be very successful if you have activity in that market that they can help you activate and make sure that you have all of the licensing opportunities that are relevant to that local market. But those aren't really as available to your average independent writer or producer, beat maker, whoever. Now that's an increasingly important segment of the creative community. And so what we, how I think about, the sort of the access that, the Kickstarter model is sort of like access to resources through your community. We have a sort of, complementary zone of access to this, infinite fractions of rights that you have to manage, that you might represent and that you have to collect on. And we're trying to do it in a, responsible, flexible and, fair way. So that those to me are like the real sort of complementary zones. This is definitely a different type of work than I've ever done before, leading a company of this size and, leading a product and engineering team and, advocating for resource allocation and prioritization across, multiple dimensions, where mostly I have been on the client-facing side of things prior to this. It's been super challenging and, learning every day on lots and lots of different fronts, but it's really, really rewarding.
So music publishing is the number one revenue stream I see missing with artists and songwriters. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because when they sign up for their PRO, which almost all of them do, the PROs are old enough and established enough that, people are like, okay, yeah, like sign up, they sign up for ASCAP when they're a teenager or BMI or whatever. But I think the point of confusion, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this, is when they're prompted to sign up for a publishing designee. Once they do that, when I meet songwriters and artists of all levels, and I ask them their publishing situation, they're like, oh, I'm with ASCAP. Oh, I'm with BMI. Mm-hmm. And then I find out they are not collecting on their music publishing. Are you seeing this? Because you're obviously talking to way more songwriters than I am every day.
Yeah. I mean, our team, that's a lot of the, like the first question, I think, if you go to our help center, like, do I need Songtrust if I have ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, IMRO, PRS, any of the, hundreds of societies around the world? And, there's lots of interpretations of how to manage those rights and those royalties that you are due. So and the way that they are structured based on, our industry sort of systems is that there's a publisher share, there's a writer share. Part of the publisher share does require you to have either an entity, or as you say, in some of the PROs, like a designation that is like kind of adds up to 200% or whatever it is that, whichever one you're looking at, because they do sort of administer them differently. There's also there are other royalties that are earned by your works based on all of the new emerging platforms and systems too. And there's also, then you add in multiple countries. And if you learn more and dig into it more about the reciprocal arrangements between societies for the specific rights that they are able to collect on, you learn that management of that on a sort of one entity to one person, without a traditional publishing infrastructure, or what we think of as a modern publishing infrastructure, is really hard. And, I think it's arguable that with independent writers, like if their earnings are primarily in their home country or their home territory, it's probably more of an exception that you're earning tremendous sums globally, but it's still your money. And there's that other piece of, the system where unclaimed works and unclaimed royalties then unfortunately become sort of redistributed at certain stages based on local, requirements and rules. And, so we also see ourselves as part of like a source of a great deal of rights that we represent, a chance for that to be minimized. So the money to be distributed to its rightful rights owner. And, that's a really important part of what we do as well.
Agreed. And again, just to define music publishing, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. I would say, like, do you know what a record company is? I mean, most people on the street know what a record company's job is in theory, which is to, to promote the recording and also exploit it in the legal sense and, collect as much money as possible. That's all music publishing is on the songwriting side. And you guys are handling the collection aspect of that, which is really empowering because anyone can sign up for Songtrust. So, right. I mean, if you want to explain music publishing another way, feel free. But I also want to hear about, tell us how Songtrust started and tell us all about Songtrust.
Yeah, I mean, I just joined 3 years ago, so I've only been here, for we'll celebrate our 10th anniversary next year. The idea was our CEO and co-founder, Justin Klifowitz's, who had founded Downtown Music Publishing 13 years ago, and realized that, a sort of the vision for downtown wasn't something that was very scalable. It was, his vision of working with, the iconic writers and rights and songs in our industry, and the sort of like precision of management of those rights and exploitation of those rights and helping them, earn royalties was for one, segment of the industry, but that the larger ecosystem, and as we see in the news almost every week now, the growing community of independent and self-released creators is, like their access to this infrastructure was really like not available at all. And so he, came up with the idea for Songtrust and built the proof of concept and, co-founded it with Joe Conyers, who, led it for many years. Until last year, and now he's part of Downtown Music Holdings. And it, so that it's a pretty simple origination idea. And what we've been trying to build over the last 10 years and, sort of primarily over the last 3 with our direct business is really making that information available to independent creators, sort of like to your question around, if I have ASCAP, do I need Songtrust? A lot of the questions we get are like, if I have Sound Exchange, there's so much sort of inconsistency in how information is shared in our business that, we do a lot of sort of this is what we do. These are the rights. This is how they work. This is how we work with them. This is what the meaning would be for you. And, try to make the case of, how our, not just network, but our application of systems and processes and our publishing industry expertise matched against the network to scale is something that is, uniquely positioned to be, a good partner.
Yeah. And I am a huge Songtrust evangelist, and I have nothing.
Yes, I know. And we're so grateful.
Well, thank you. I always add, like, I have nothing to gain by doing so. It's just, you said, it's like the idea is, I think you said something like simple and effective. And that's something I've really learned as an entrepreneur. And it's like, on one hand, like, it is simple, but on the other, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was just so necessary. Again, when I explain it to people, it's like most people know what TuneCore, CD Baby, DistroKid is, but I feel like Songtrust was really the first self-serve publishing option. I could be wrong. I didn't realize it was 10 years old already.
Yeah. There are other people that do similar things to what we do in the market, but I think our focus and how we present what we do is a little distinctive, even in this segment of individual creators and songwriters, because we're really only focused on the rights management piece. So there are other, companies that manage that, sort of help with sync placements and things like that are, I think that's great if that is successful for them and successful for their clients. Even as an individual writer and like rights owner myself, I know how difficult managing expectations around like an additional exploitation of your work, and the idea that you might get a big windfall of money or even incremental windfalls of money that are like maybe not huge sums, but it's just not it's something that I think when you manage the expectations around it, sync licensing is not the area of focus that you're in many cases managing a lot of disappointment, right? And that's something that we're already disappointed enough in the world that, and the work that we do that we're focused on is so complicated that, we've really decided, and this was decided before I joined, so I'm very comfortable with it, that we've really decided to focus on the rights management, the precision of the work that we do, and helping our clients get the money that they're owed as quickly as possible, as precisely as possible, and being a good sort of citizen, if you will, in the rights ecosystem with societies, with the DSPs, with the various licensing representatives in the industry and emerging platforms, and doing that in a way that is it might not sound very glamorous, but it's really important, and I think that's again what's pretty motivating to me.
Well, you guys are taking on the complicated part and simplifying it and streamlining it for songwriters. Like, I tried really hard to actually not, break down publishing further in the book. I tried really hard to not like define a mechanical royalty. And then I'm like, I have to explain how they cover songs. So I did have to do it. But I just wanted to educate, like, this is what music publishing is, and here's how you collect on it. I interviewed Zoe Keating for the forward of the book, and she's like, you can still break the revenue streams down further. I'm like, Zoe, they don't know what music publishing is, and they don't know how to collect on it. So someday you and I can write the advanced placement version, but like, this is what we have to educate on now. So you talked about, I mean, really, like, you guys have world-class collection. I view it as like, it's the same collection mechanisms as Downtown, which is one of the best music publishers in the world. So having access to that is phenomenal. You mentioned you guys don't handle sync placement. So are you able to share are you able to give kind of recommendations to your clients on how and where they should go about that?
Yeah, we do. We refer people to other, one of the things is we, make sure to emphasize that you as a client now have 100% ability to license and collect the publisher's share. And so that's a very, we expect that to also be a pretty powerful opportunity. If you do, like, if, for example, if you are with a label and they present you the master license opportunity, and you own your own publishing and you control the exploitation of it, then you will keep that 100% of that share of that license. So, that is something that I think is an important and hopefully empowering aspect of what we offer. It also, there's lots of options of people who do this, and some of whom who even do it at scale. So, that's a perfectly fine thing that we'll refer people to do. And again, it's, if that is the focus of your creative work, I think, and you've been, working in music yourself for long enough to know that the amount of money available in those kinds of licenses has also shifted.
Yeah.
And it's, like from maybe really large amounts at one point to smaller, and now maybe even more competitive, and sort of some really exceptional cases that you'll get a big, huge creative license is, a little bit different than it has been. So again, that kind of goes back to like that's not a commonly discussed aspect of our industry, like how much of the actual royalties and revenues, we earn in aggregate are on sync. So I think that's the kind of thing, like if people are offering that, I'm sure it's a lot to support it.
Yes. I hope this is an okay question to ask if I can even articulate it correctly. I guess like something I love about Songtrust is that your entire catalog is in one place. I guess I just really want to highlight that because this is the part that gets a little weird. It's so easy to tick that box when you're distributing with TuneCore or CD Baby. And of course, you guys are also CD Baby's publishing administration. So I guess this isn't really a question unless you want to comment on it. Again, it's so nice to have all of your music publishing in one place instead of like one release is published here, one release is published there. It's just like, just consolidate and make your life easier is what I think.
Yeah. I mean, that is, I think, one very positive aspect of what we do is, we can, we offer the flexibility. So if you do have rights with another administrator, as long as it's not the same works, there is that possibility to work, to represent limited repertoire with us. And with some of the distribution companies, it is much more aligned to the work that they represent for you on, your distribution of that work. And so a big part of our growth has been around people who aren't recording artists. They're producers and they have shares of songs and they have other ways that they've been collaborating with writers and different, uses of the works. So that's been a big area of focus for us. But I agree. I mean, I appreciate the compliment, and I definitely agree that it's a nice, we all have a lot of things to manage, and everybody wants an improved solution for one size fits all. And I understand that is an advantage, perhaps if you are a recording artist and you're releasing works, that using your distribution platform for the publishing administration as well makes sense. But if you're, have, like, for example, my catalog of songs is that I have shares of publishing rights on is about 50. And it's awesome to be able to see them in one place and understand all of the different exploitation and, sort of map that to my, my writer's statement from my PR last cap and be able to sort of, understand things a little bit more. And truthfully, as you well know as well, like a lot of people don't want to dig into those sorts of statements. They just want to get the check and they want to see where things are going. And that's what our platform version, sort of like the songtrust.com experience, that's what it's really there to support. So you can sort of see all of your activity historically and, look into reports in a broad way or small.
It's such a good point. And, again, of course, you represent so many songwriters and producers who aren't, necessarily public performing artists as well. But just to highlight that, for artists, because I've talked to artists about it on this podcast, like that box is really attractive to check when you're distributing your music. I just
Yeah. We see it from CD Baby. Like, we know it's been a very successful and important part of our growth too. Certainly we would never have, between the work that we've done for Downtown and the work that we've done for CD Baby, arguably like pretty extreme versions of the sort of rights management landscape. That's what makes us stronger. So that's where we've been informed by both of those opportunities, and yeah, we see how convenient it is for people to add that to what they do.
But at the same time, if you don't distribute it with CD Baby next time, I just think that it can be, we're just trying to make your lives easier, people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're here for you. And work with Emily. She knows how to refer you to us.
Yeah, well, work with Songtrust. So last question, what does building a sustainable music career mean to you?
It's such a great question. I am, I'm pretty much like, I wouldn't say I'm midway. Maybe I'm more than midway through my working career, or maybe I'll never be done, depending on how things turn out, knock wood. But I think my personal, the things that impress me are people being able to make decisions for themselves based on information or the rights that they manage. And if you think about the headlines this week, I know this is a podcast, so people could be listening to it anytime, but this was the week that Dylan sold his catalog, writer and publisher share, right? So like, it's a big effing deal, and it's a little bit wild to consider. But when people sort of ask me questions like, why would he do that? Like, I don't know. And no one does. And it's his to make. It's his decision to make, right? So I support any stage of life that you have that autonomy and authority to make decisions over how you want your work and your business to be managed. I think what I for artists or writers who are earlier in their career than Bob Dylan, I really love a similar thought around being able to make those decisions and not having to be put in a position to give up rights in perpetuity, or for whatever sort of like might seem like unending term when you're 15 years old. So if there's other headlines of superstars who have made deals early in their career, perhaps on the recorded side of music, that then, give up any sort of connection to the master ownership of those works. And, then that becomes very dramatic when they're not even 30, to say like, they can never be part of the decision on how those works will be shared and interpreted. And so I think if, people can be part of that decision, and the industry can also support that flexibility and that, support that autonomy, and understand that it's, that there's great power and value in doing that. I think that's a much healthier reality. And that's sort of where the sweet spot that I like to sort of walk in. It's a little bit, maybe inconsistent, but I think it does make sense that, earlier in your career, to make those decisions, to believe in a promise, like the only way you'll ever become, successful is to give up any sort of decision-making around how these works will be used, seems like really that has to change, And so I feel very good about where we sit in that part of the world.
You should, because we haven't said, when you do sign up for Songtrust to administer your songwriting rights, the songwriter owns all their rights. So we should make that clear.
Correct. Yes. We touched on it a little bit with the sync, but yeah, that's the thing. It's like we're just your partner in access, and our term is very flexible. So we support you. If a different opportunity came along that you thought was, the right one for you in your career, then we want to support that, and not be sort of this prohibitive entity that I think, ultimately ends up being very contentious and unpleasant. And like, that's really what I don't have much time for in my life. I don't think that many people do.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of friction and a lot of unnecessary like land grabbing and things that, are contentious and unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
Lord knows when you're working out of your bedroom or, your small laundry room or whatever you got to do these days, you don't want it to be where you don't want to be upset while you're doing it.
Well, you heard it from the horse's mouth, and that's something I think as well as you can get out of it, right? Like what rights, company says that in music ever, know?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I think, that's very important to us. So, thanks for the opportunity to share that perspective, Emily. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. And I just want to add one last thing on the Dylan thing. I know that was super emotional for, I think, fans, industry people, all of that. But I would guess it's he's getting older. Like, it's nice. I would think the intention is like, I'm going to make this choice and take care of my affairs, as opposed to, I think, like, I know Aretha Franklin was a songwriter, actually, but I think her 10th will was found under the couch or something. Right. So maybe it was like taking care of that, for his family. And
sure. And it's his business, right? Exactly. Like, I mean, he created the art and the poetry and the music, and it's his to decide what to do with what he's created. Especially, as you say, at this stage in his life, and being able to be the one in charge of it. And I think that's, I don't take exception with that. So that's, and that part isn't really our business. But I do find it harder to handle when people who are in their early stages of their career then lose the authority. And that is that, and it's not at their own decision, or it's based on a decision that wasn't, I think, to some of what we've discussed, like, wasn't informed by their understanding of the deep nuance of how things work and what perpetuity. I mean, not like people don't understand what perpetuity is. It's just like irrelevant when you're 15, exactly. Right? Like, because you're so.
Yes, but again, I hadn't even thought to talk about this on any of these podcast episodes, but it's something for artists to think about, whether, you're further along in your career or not. It's just like making things easier for your family and your work. So people aren't fighting about it, because nobody wants that. So I don't mean to end on such a bummer note.
That's okay. No, we're good. I think it's an optimistic note, okay. Like there's new paths, right?
Yes. Exactly. And don't leave your will under the couch.
Please don't. Please don't.
Yeah.
All right. It was great talking to you. Thanks again for having me. I'm so grateful.
Yes. Thank you, Molly. It was just such a pleasure to catch up with you. And that is a wrap for this episode of How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams. We will catch you on the next episode, and have a great day, night, wherever you are. Thanks again. Thanks so much to Matthew Wong for composing the music for this podcast, as well as to my engineer, Nathan Kane, and absolutely to Molly Neuman, president of Songtrust. Tune in next time, where we discuss how to land a sync placement. And if you have questions or anything in the meantime, I'm at mwizzle on social media. Catch you then.